Hello and welcome to Creature Club, a podcast where we talk to you about the 5th edition Monster Manual Monsters. Today we are nearing the end of our trek through the dragons. I am joined today by my delightful co-host, Daniel.
Hello.
Hello there.
Hello there.
Today we are going to be looking at another dragon template. Dan and Mikey walked you guys through the Dracolich last episode, which was an excellent episode. Mm-hmm. Well done, lads.
Thank you very much.
I enjoyed it very much. Lots of tangential ideas.
It was good fun.
With the templates, you're going to basically have a lot of wiggle room for doing whatever you want. And such is very much the same for this Shadow Dragon, because I have a bunch of ideas that I think are really cool that I came up with.
All right, exciting.
And that I think you will have fun having them bounced off you.
I love bouncing. I love having things bounced off me.
It's just a good time, you know? It's just a great time. Particularly ideas, because then you feel like, you appreciate my input. Yeah. That's so nice. Shadow Dragons today.
Shadow Dragons today. Shadow Dragons yesterday. Shadow Dragons tomorrow.
Indeed. For the rest of time. How do they look throughout the history of Dungeons and Dragons?
So unlike the other dragons we've covered, unlike the other true dragons, and a bit more like than the Dracolich, which we discovered wasn't actually in the original book, the Shadow Dragon first appears in the second Monster Manual, not the first, where we get sort of more dragons. We get like a bunch of them. We get the Mist Dragon, the Dracolich, we get the Fairy Dragon, which we'll run into much later, and the Dragon Horse, who tragically didn't make the transition to 5th edition. But I can tell you right now, it's the art is a lot of fun. I'm enjoying the art. It looks tragic. Really serious and goofy at the same time. But yes, the Shadow Dragon first appears in the 2nd edition book. It's a little different to what we get in the 5th edition book. In the 5th edition book, it talks about how normal dragons can be transformed into Shadow Dragons.
Yeah.
But in the context of this second Monster Manual, it just says that Shadow Dragons are from what's just called Shadowland, what will become the Shadowfell. But like back then it was like just called Shadowland. I assume maybe someone thought they wouldn't be, their game about, being running around and being stupid wouldn't be taken seriously enough if it was called Shadowland, so had to be changed.
Yes.
But anyway, it's back in 1st edition it was just called Shadowland, and the Shadow Dragon was just a dragon from Shadowland. A lot of what we see other than that is similar. It likes the dark, mostly solitary. It doesn't like the bright light because it can't see in bright light, but it can see well in the dark. It likes it's evil. It likes other evil dragons. It can hide in shadows and disappear. It says as a 10th level thief, but like in the context in the context of the game, that just means it's very good at hiding. Because a 10th level thief is a max level thief. And then, they can turn ethereal. It mentions an interesting thing here. It says Shadow Dragons cannot be subdued and sold, which if you remember back when we talked about True Dragons in 1st edition, there was a big long section about capturing and even selling dragons and how they were valuable but dangerous. And and I remember noting that it was interesting that the nature of 1st edition was that it would sort of take you aside almost and say, here's how this entity works and here's why you might want to capture it.
The most dangerous game.
Literally.
Dragons.
Yeah. The most interesting part I think about this 1st edition book, I mean, obviously we get some of the basics of what a Shadow Dragon is, but there's a nice little bit right at the end here where it says, Shadow Dragons appear as worm-like dragons of lighter and darker shadows. Their bat-like wings are semi-transparent, as is most of their body. If someone is trying to spot a Shadow Dragon, the eyes, pools of feral grey opalescence, are the easiest to detect. Then, however, it is usually too late.
Oh my goodness.
So I like that. I like that little bit of tells you a little bit about how dangerous these creatures are, and even gives you a little idea of how you might try to spot them, or even as a DM, how you might hint to the party that they have encountered a Shadow Dragon.
Yeah, I like the specific wording of that, having it be kind of see-through, because I don't think any shadow is actually complete darkness. It's very hard not to see things that are in an actual shadow, because all the rest of the ambient light will lighten everything around it.
Yeah.
So being you can see things that are in a shadow, so you should be able to see this guy, and he wouldn't just be as black as a black dragon. you know? Like he would still be slightly colorful. That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah, I agree.
That's for me.
Oh yeah, and there's a fun thing where their breath weapon in first edition is like a cloud of darkness. It blinds people, and then it says it lowers their life energy.
Ooh.
I love this description because it's so confusing. It says and lowers their life energy so as to leave them only 25% of their usual vitality.
Oh,
and then
no.
in brackets, level or hit dice. 50% of saving throw is successful, which is just like, that's so baffling. Imagine in 5th edition the mathematics of like, okay, I want you to divide I want you to have 1/4 of your normal HP.
Yeah.
Like what? like or I want you to quarter your hit dice. It's like I'm an odd level. What should I do?
Yeah. I have 93 health. What am I supposed to do?
So yeah, it's a little strange. So then in 2nd edition, we get a lot of the same stuff. It still doesn't talk about the idea that they turn from normal dragons into shadow dragons. The implication is still shadow dragons are their own species of dragons, effectively.
Yeah. It seems in 5th edition, they definitely tried to limit their options to be like, you have your chromatic and you have your metallic, and anything else that you find will be a variant of those. And of course, Tiamat and Bahamut.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Are the kind of other ones. Although, did they add other kind of weird dragons in other books? I didn't see any in other...
there is in 5th edition.
Yeah, did they add gem dragons or anything like that?
I don't believe they did in 5th edition. I
fair
haven't
enough.
seen any other true dragons as such.
Cool.
No gem or other like mist or whatever.
Yeah, or like semi-precious stones.
yeah, there haven't been any more dragons. I don't think so anyway. I'm happy to be proven wrong. There might be ones in that new Wildmount book.
Oh, yeah.
And there's also Sasha's book all about what I did and how to get there, or whatever it's called, the new one going out that I've forgotten. Which might
Tasha's,
have...
The Tasha's
that's a Tasha,
hideous laughter
from
person.
Hideous book, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's again more of a splat book for PCs, but maybe there are monsters at the back. I don't know.
Who knows?
Who can say?
Not I.
So anyway, yeah. So then in the 2nd edition book, it still has the weird breath weapon where it reduces your life energy by 3/4, which is still like the sort of nightmarish mathematics that, like, you know, I almost love the fact, I like the idea of like, the game is hard, not because the dragon is a hard enemy, but because the dragon makes you do hard math. I think that's a really funny idea.
Yeah. Do you think that they were like, man, we asked people to quarter their health. Maybe it'll be easier for them if we tell them to reduce their health by 3/4. Do you think that'll make it easier?
Got a lot of complaints. You know what it needs? A reword. This will fix it. Watch this, guys.
No. And then they did. No complaints afterwards.
No complaints. And you know what? They were damn right. I will say, I think it's interesting. It's obviously an absolute nightmare in terms of like compared to the difficulty of just dealing HP damage. But it actually is a cool idea that because the plane of shadow is so like anathemic to life, that its breath weapon doesn't deal like damage. Damage is what happens if you get hit by a hammer. This is like anti-life affecting you. So you just lose parts of yourself. I think that's actually a really, it's a very unique mechanic and very interesting. And I will say just for a moment, jokes aside, it's actually kind of a cool idea, even though it's very complicated.
I think it's one of the most frightening things that you can do to a D&D character who is like committed to their character. Like they have gone through this adventure and built themselves up and they've become stronger and stronger, and then just like taking away their progress basically is frightening as a person who plays games and in concept as a human being. Like I start to lose life essence. My vitality starts leaving me. Like that's a pretty horrifying situation to find yourself in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Also, it's funny, they get this weird, unique ability that it's funny because it just kind of casually mentions it, but it's actually really cool. It's called Create Shadows, and it's just, they basically create a massive area. It says 100 yards. I don't know how many feet that is because I can't remember the conversion. Is it 3 feet to a yard?
300.
So 300. So a radius of 300 feet. So a massive radius of leaping shadows.
Leaping shadows?
It's called Leaping Shadows.
Okay.
So basically, all magical light and darkness are negated, and it's just these shadows. And basically, creatures can try to hide in it, but shadow creatures from the plane of shadow, like the Shadow Dragon, can basically treat it as normal terrain in all respects. So they're basically constantly invisible. So it can basically create this like massive area whereby only it can tell what's happening. And the idea that it both cancels light and darkness plays into something we see here later, which isn't mechanically represented, but is described as shadow dragons hate both bright light and total darkness, preferring variegated lighting with patches of diffuse light and deep inky shadows. So in other words, they actually like somewhere where light and shadow play together so that they can enjoy the shadows. It describes that they prefer like, deep forest or ancient ruins, somewhere where the sort of light and shadow are play and they can retreat when the sun comes out and then return to the surface when it's nighttime and things like that.
That just gave me a really cool idea for like a Shadow Dragon's lair. Could be like inside this great cathedral that has this stained glass window.
Oh, yeah.
That all this cool light filters down through, and it like moves other pieces of glass that are around the place to cause these reflections of light so that it can get like blue light and all these different cool colored lights coming through, really reflecting, and that could be fun. Part of it could be your characters could either be conflicted in like smashing this great ancient cathedral window to give themselves a slight advantage of the Shadow Dragon being at a slight disadvantage, or whatever affects its like when it's in bright light, whatever that does to it, or preserving it and saving it for whatever religion or god will reestablish itself in this great cathedral.
So that's it in second edition, and then in third edition it's very similar. Third edition a lot of the time it's kind of similar to second edition. It still has the cool create shadows abilities. It's very similar other than that. They've simplified that breath weapon to just deal negative levels rather than 3/4 of your current hit dice or levels. It's just you take a number of negative levels, and then they recover over time, basically. Sort of like, a lot like taking hit point damage, but a little more complicated. By the time we get to 4th edition, that's gone. Yeah, it's a little similar, but it's and in fairness, it's similar, but it's much more straightforward and suits 4th edition's purposes much better. So in 4th edition, it is breath weapon. It's got all the abilities. It's still actually got that kind of big AoE of darkness. It's got something that's very similar.
Sweet.
But now it has a cool thing where it can specifically create an area of darkness and then teleport inside it. So it's a little more active. Rather than just being it's dark and therefore I'm invisible to you mortals. It's actually able to like do this cool. It's called Shadow Walk, which we see I think in some 5th edition characters as well.
Is that where they walk backwards, but it looks like they're walking forwards? Like...
Exactly. And then they shake your hand and you die. But yeah, so they have an ability now. The breath weapon deals just regular old-fashioned necrotic damage, like your grandfather used to make.
Of course.
And but then you also lose a healing surge, which is basically like it's a resource in 4th edition. For people who haven't played 4th edition, healing surges are a resource that you could spend either out of combat to regain health or in combat, but only some of the time. They're very much like the hit dice, except they had more uses in combat than hit dice, whereas hit dice are very much, you spend these during a short rest and otherwise you don't touch them.
I didn't play very much 4th edition, but I do remember that kind of healing surge being pretty helpful when I was my reckless, fighty self.
Yeah, like the healing surges, and like in general, like you would have quite a few. So losing one healing surge to a breath weapon isn't a huge problem, but obviously they might get multiple breath weapons off in a fight, and then it starts to become a problem.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's Dragons Through the Ages.
Through the ages.
Through the ages.
And hence we arrive at present day. Shall we read through what it says in the book about dragon, shadow? I'm sorry, I've just very enjoyed that. Yes, please, you should take the lead. I just did a lot of talking. I shall. Shadow dragons are true dragons that were either born in the Shadowfell or transformed by years spent within its dismal confines. Some shadow dragons embrace the Shadowfell for its bleak landscapes and desolation. Others seek to return to the material plane, hungry to spread the darkness and evil of the plane of shadow. Damn, I almost read that so perfectly. Last 3 words tripped me up.
They got you.
The next one is about dark portals.
No.
Portals to the Shadowfell manifest in forlorn places and the deep gloom of subterranean caverns. Okay. The dragons that lair in such places often discover these portals and find themselves transported to a new realm. Ancient dragons that sleep in their lairs for months or years at a time might find themselves spirited away, never knowing that a portal has formed without their knowledge as they dream. Some of our dragons have had, like, dream abilities, or dream-like abilities, when they were awake, so I'd presume that they'd have some kind of magical protection, unless it's suggesting that someone outside of the dragon's, like, retinue, or its people that it might work with, have just opened a portal to the Shadowfell underneath it. That's kind of a cool idea, where, like, there's this great ancient heroic dragon that some bad guys have opened this portal underneath it, and it's just popped through, and now they can do whatever devious deeds they want. That's an interesting little hook. Alrighty.
It is.
Next one is Recast in Shadow. The transformation to a shadow dragon happens over a period of years, during which time a dragon's scales lose their luster and fade to a charcoal hue. Its leathery wings become translucent, its eyes paling to pools of opalescent grey. Shadow dragons find sunlight abhorrent, and they are weaker in bright light than they are in darkness. Darkness makes the dragon fade to a spectral shadow of its former self. Oh, shadow of its former self.
Literally.
Yes.
Wow.
The magical nature of dragons holds an attraction for the Shadowfell, which seems to somehow crave the might and majesty of these great reptiles. Shadowfell has a dispiriting effect on its denizens, such that the longer a creature remains on the plane, the more it accepts the plane's malaise. As months and years pass for a dragon in the Shadowfell, it becomes aware of the transformation being wrought upon it, and yet can do nothing to prevent it. Okay. That's kind of interesting, giving the Shadowfell kind of a motivation and a little bit of character.
Yeah, actually that's true. Yeah.
That's kind of fun. The final little paragraph about the Shadow Dragon is called Back in the World. You know, back in the world.
USSR.
Yeah, back in the US. Copyright.
Oh, we're gone.
A shadow dragon is so suffused with the power of the Shadowfell that even a return to the material plane can't undo its transformation. Some shadow dragons attempt to lure other creatures from the mortal realm back to the Shadowfell to keep them company, at least until they tire of their guests and devour them. Jesus Christ.
Well, there you go.
I'm lonely, come with me. I'm bored of you, I'll eat you.
Nom 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 nom.
Others are happy to leave the Shadowfell behind forever, understanding that the treasure and power are easier to come by in the material plane. Alright.
Oh no.
Sure. Okay. So once they've been taken by the shadow, it basically lingers on them forever. I wonder, is there a way for them to... I mean, finding a way to return a shadow dragon to its former chromatic or metallic self might be a fun little adventure. Like, if you as a DM come up with an idea and then want to run your characters through it, then that sounds like a fun little way to go about it. Yeah.
I agree, yeah.
Would you like to start reading the little Shadow Dragon template?
Sure. Do we have anything else to say before we jump onto the template itself?
I don't think so. I think that I kind of gave a running commentary of my thoughts during that small section.
No, I'd agree.
Yeah. What about yourself?
I was only going to say, I think as far as I can tell, and maybe I've just missed it, that's entirely possible, but as far as I can tell, the first time we get the idea of shadow as a transformative element for dragons is in 5th edition.
Okay.
So I'm not sure why it was a decision that in this edition it would be like a transformative thing. I'd wonder, is it something to do with the fact that they decided to make shadow dragons a template that you put on top of dragons?
Right.
And therefore, because it's a template and it's changing an existing creature, what if it was also a transformative element in the lore? Maybe.
Right.
Yeah, just a sort of an observation. I think it's interesting. Like, as far as I can tell, in every other edition, it just gives the idea that shadow dragons are just a kind of dragon. They come from the Shadowfell or Shadowland or Plane of Shadow.
They are their own thing.
Yeah, basically, they're just their own entity. Like, in some ways, they're almost like the idea that, like, well, obviously the material plane has these dragons, and then the Plane of Shadow has these dragons, because, like, you know, they're different places and they have different things.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's better or worse, but it's just interesting. That's all.
Indeed. Nice. So shall we jump into the old meat and potatoes of this episode?
The meat and potatoes.
Yeah,
Pates and Matite. That sounded bad. I didn't like that, actually.
It's not our first time. Play the music. God damn it.
Get us out of here, please. All right, let's see here. Shadow Dragon template. Only a true dragon can transform into a Shadow Dragon, and only if it is born in the Shadowfell or remains there for several years. I mean, I don't know why you're telling me this now.
Again.
A Draco Lich can't be turned into a Shadow Dragon since it loses its draconic nature when it becomes undead.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, fair enough. Grand.
Sure.
Seems sort of like a missed opportunity personally, but that's fine. It's your game. It's your game, Wizards. You do what you want. When a dragon becomes a Shadow Dragon, it retains its statistics except as described below. Okay, now we're talking about rules.
All right.
The Shadow Dragon might retain or lose any or all of its lair actions or inherit new ones as the DM sees fits. I fucking hate that line.
Yep.
I hate it, man. It's so like it's literally like saying the point of the game is to have fun. It's like, that's not, you didn't need to put that in a rule book that I paid money for. Like,
yeah, you're supposed to describe to me how the fun that I want to have can manifest.
Yeah, like if I'm gonna make it up anyway, then I may as well have not bought the monster manual.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Again, like this isn't a big deal, but I think it's a shame. I think it's a missed opportunity not to, like, especially, so this is a thing I would actually argue, in particular, in the context of the Shadow Dragon, in 3rd and 4th edition, and even in 2nd edition, so basically every edition since the games, with the exception of 1st edition, as far as I can tell, and maybe it's in here somewhere, but these big long paragraphs of text do not have any formatting. So I must have missed it. But as far as I can tell, in every previous edition of the game, the Shadow Dragon has had an ability, and it's been like the iconic Shadow Dragon ability, the ability it has unlocked. And it's, so in the context of the 2nd and 3rd edition book, it's the Great Worm ability. In other words, the ability the dragon gets when it's at its most powerful form. The equivalent of how the later dragons get legendary actions because they're like legendary entities in the world. And it's the leaping shadows. It's the massive aura of shadow that like blots out all light and even blots out darkness and creates basically like, it's almost like a tiny portal to the plane of shadow because it's like rewards denizens of that world and punishes everyone else. And it feels like that would be a really natural fit as a lair action.
Yeah.
You know, just like it can create this huge, like it could literally be like the book describes, like a 300-foot aura. Like, you know, literally just like the battlefield is in shadow now, and the only one who can see is the dragon. So like, I think that's a real missed opportunity.
Even if your like party successfully sneaks up and gets a first round of just like straight up damage on the Shadow Dragon, as soon as it is awake and aware, it casts this shadow, and then suddenly the entire team is put at a disadvantage by the shock of suddenly being like in this strange shadowy realm, and the dragon is now furious and ready to tear them to shreds. It'd be great fun. That's super cool. Things to add.
Yeah, anyway, okay, so let's get on with these actual, now we're talking about actual rules. Damage resistances. The dragon has resistance to necrotic damage. Yeah, fair enough. That's pretty good because all dragons already have a damage immunity, so now it's got a resistance as well as an immunity.
There you go.
Skill proficiency, stealth. The dragon's proficiency bonus is doubled for its dexterity stealth checks. Cool. Ooh. So it's sneaky. Living Shadow. This is a very powerful ability. While in dim light or darkness, the dragon has resistance to damage that isn't force, psychic, or radiant. Yeah. So that's really powerful. That's that effectively huge. That basically creates a context so that all of your abilities, with the exception of these 3 damage types, deal half damage. So obviously the big one is weapons. If you were planning on hitting this dragon with weapons, like now you're going to have a bad time. But obviously also the fact that it already resists necrotic damage innately. So, well, I mean, they don't stack, but like it already had a resistance and an immunity, but now it has a wide spanning resistance, and it still has that damage immunity from being a dragon.
Yeah. Would you say that if one of your players like fired a fireball at it, would you say that the light from the fireball is enough to negate that dim light or darkness.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that's actually a really... in fact, I would argue that, like, if my players were like, okay, like, if the fighter was like, I'm going to ready my action for when the wizard hits the dragon with his fireball, then I'm going to attack. I would even say that the fighter also benefits from the elimination.
Well done. You get double damage on that one, man. Good
because,
thinking.
because my attitude would be that you're strategizing, you're playing the game, you're engaging, and you're saying, like, I'm going to time my attacks. Like, I'm going to do this thing so that it, like, because obviously, in a very specific context, 5e's rules, the extra attacks the fighter gets only work on its turn. So if it chooses to ready an action, it's going to deal less damage on the wizard's turn, with the benefit that it will ignore the resistance, which obviously is its own benefit. I would say that, like, absolutely, that the like light from spells is light, and in some ways that's fun because it even creates a context where you might use fire spells against the red dragon because you want light to be created or whatever.
Like, presumably that is somebody like reading and understanding the shadow dragon's movements, and so you want to reward your players for
absolutely
observing their enemy and working around it. And of course it's still just as valid to just like huck a couple fireballs and then like suddenly come to the understanding. Like, you can walk your players into that and be like, oh, you shot a fireball, and then somebody else tries to hit it after somebody else did a little bit of less damage, but they're like, all right, but this is all I can do, and they'll realize, oh, this is actually doing more damage while there's fire about.
Yeah. Okay, so then after that, shadow stealth. While in dim light or darkness, the dragon can take the hide action as a bonus action. So
sure.
I think there's other creatures who have that ability as well. I believe that there's like similar shade-based entities that can do similar things. But yeah, just like you can hide. I don't necessarily think that hiding and dragons play very well together in 5e.
Yeah.
But that could be my bias. You know what? Like that, I'm perfectly willing to accept that.
Yeah.
And in fact, a fight where you're in a big dark cave and the dragon keeps hitting you and then literally like hit and fade tactics, but literally because it's a living shadow and just disappears.
Nice.
Is very cool.
Yep.
But you need a huge map. Like, torches are so bright in 5e.
Like 60 feet?
Like, yeah, is it like 20 feet of bright light and then 20 feet of dim light? So like that's 40 feet per player. If they spread out even slightly, they can create like a huge overlapping area of bright light. And if I understand the rules correctly, 2 areas of dim light create bright light.
Do they?
I think. I don't know. I actually don't know, but I have a suspicion they do. But my point is that it's actually just, there's a lot of, like, it's very easy for the players to create a lot of light.
Yeah.
So, or obviously there's, the cantrip dancing lights, there's the light cantrip, there's actual spells like daylight that do similar things.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's finish this, and we'll talk about this stuff after we've actually read them all.
Yeah.
Sunlight sensitivity. While in sunlight, the dragon has disadvantage on attack rolls as well as wisdom perception checks that rely on sight. Cool.
Sure.
Yeah, totally standard. I think kobolds and a lot of other creatures that live in caves just have this ability, just that they don't like being in bright light. And it just creates a really obvious distinction where you want to not fight them in the dark, but they're going to want to fight you in the dark. I think we might have had ages ago, I don't know if you remember this creature, Tim. We talked about a high-level creature that had sunlight sensitivity, and like we talked about using it as a boss monster against a low-level party who had to like rely on sticking to like pockets of sunlight in like a cave system to avoid getting eaten.
Gosh, I cannot remember.
I have a kind of a vague memory of that, and I think it might have been because it was based on like a Zelda dungeon I played recently or something. But anyway, that do that again, but with this.
Yeah.
New action, bite. If the dragon deals acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison damage with its bite, change that damage type to necrotic. Okay, great. So as we covered, I think while we were kind of finishing up our dragons, the chromatic dragons deal elemental damage with their bite, and the metallic dragons do not, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
So this would change them.
Yeah, just a quick substitution for any of the chromatics.
Then we get the new action, and this is the new cool stuff. Any damage-dealing breath weapon possessed by the dragon deals necrotic damage instead of its original damage type. Cool, so replacement, exactly the same as the bite. And then we get the spice. A humanoid reduced to 0 hit points by this damage dies, and an undead shadow rises from its corpse.
From its core.
from its corpse. My corpse. From its corpse and acts immediately after the dragon in the initiative count. The shadow is now under the dragon's control.
Yeah, yuck.
So this is very effective because...
I fight my friends.
I fight my friends. No, Ike, no. Because... or was that Marth?
I think it was Ike.
I think it was Ike. We like Ike. So this is really powerful because, first of all, reducing someone to 0 hit points and then immediately killing them skips out on saving throws and also skips out on like healing word and everything like that. Like all the stuff that players can do to like keep someone from dying. Just keep them at 1 HP so they can keep taking turns and dealing damage.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. Second of all, a shadow, even though it is a super low level monster, first of all, in the context of the sort of fight that this shadow dragon wants to have, in other words, more dark, it's very effective. It's a very dangerous creature. But also, even though it is very a low CR monster, low challenge monster, it's infamous for having the ability to drain strength when it hits you. So it's also really dangerous, especially in conjunction with other monsters, like a massive shadow dragon that is demanding your attention, for example.
Oh, yeah. Forgotten that Shadow was actually a monster in the monster manual. It's on page 269 for anybody who wants to know. Nice. But yeah, I think that an addition that I would make to that Shadow Breath is that it can extinguish magical and non-magical lights.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Just to give itself an area to hide in so that it can use its shadow ability.
Yeah.
A torch you can relight, and spells you can restart, like cantrips.
Yeah, cantrips you can just recast. Yeah, absolutely.
But it gives the dragon an opportunity to hop into the darkness and use its hide ability real quick and be able to make it continue to be an interesting fight as opposed to just like, let's light up this entire area. Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree, especially because otherwise the dragon doesn't have any ability to deal with light at all, basically.
Before we get too far into sharing our other cool ideas, shall we move on from our meat and potatoes to Desert Town?
Yes, we should. But I want to say that I'm pretty sure that there's a... Oh, no, yeah, I was going to say, I was like, did the Shadow Breath used to put out torches? But of course it didn't, because the Shadow Breath used to make you do maths on your character sheet. That was its previous superpower. Yeah, which was, you had to do hard maths.
Yeah, it was blinding just as that. While you're doing maths and not paying attention to what your next move is going to be, the dragon is moving around the table.
Dragon's stealing all your D4s so you can't use your dagger anymore.
No!
Yeah, sorry, I actually did remember it. I don't know if this is in any other edition, but in Monster Manual 2 from first edition D&D, the breath weapon does the weird math on your character sheet, but it also blinds you. And I really like that. And we can talk about that more in Desert Town, but I want to just make sure that we get that on the table.
Yeah.
In fact, why don't we go to Desert Town and I'll talk about why I like it.
Go for it. Bring in the trumpets.
Like in Mambo number 5? Trumpet!
Guitar!
I fucking love that, man. I love the idea of, like, you know, before you play an instrument, you have to declare it. Trumpet! And then you play the drum. It can't be played before then, obviously.
Yes, of course. That's like...
Whoa, what the fuck is that? You didn't tell me what that instrument is. Okay, so the reason I like the blinding is because the dragon, as we've discussed already, has well, not necessarily problem. Basically, the dragon is a big sack of hit points that you slap. It's like a big bag of meat. It's like in Rocky when he goes into the freezer and punches the meat bags. The dragon is that meat bag because it's just a load of HP and a bunch of attacks, and it can fly, and that's kind of it. So the Shadow Dragon's breath weapon, changing to necrotic damage, turning you into a shade if you die, and also perhaps blinding you, is a really interesting like triple threat because first of all, it just deals damage. So like, okay, I've lost some HP. And then maybe you make a con save to avoid being blinded. So then you have to make a saving throw or something bad happens. And then whether or not you get blinded or not, then if you are killed by it, another thing happens. So the reason I like it is because it's actually very, in terms of like the rules, you would just have to like make a saving throw to not take damage. If you fail that one, make another saving throw to not go blind. And if you die, turn into a shadow. But like, I guess the sequence of rules is straightforward, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, it's actually not a complicated thing that's happening. It's like, if it hits you, you have to watch out for being blinded. If it doesn't hit you, you don't have to go blind. and if it kills you, you're a ghost now.
Yeah, you don't need to worry about being blind then.
Now you don't need to play anymore. You can go make the tea.
Yeah.
So like, and I think like stuff like that, I think I like abilities like that, abilities that are kind of fundamentally straightforward, but maybe do things in a way that like change the battlefield. So like dealing damage changes the battlefield one way, blinding people changes them another way, turning people into shades changes another thing. And so that like those three parts collectively mean like depending on where you are in the battle, it matters to you differently, right? Like if you're playing a character who doesn't care if you go blind, just as an example, that's not a problem, but the damage might be a problem. Right. And if you're a character who has a load of health and a really good con save, that breath isn't a problem. But your allies who are maybe low on health and aren't as resilient as you, it's going to be a problem, because not only will they potentially die, but they'll create another problem for you. And, you might be the big, tough, strong frontline fighter, but once one of those shadows comes up and starts draining your strength score, now you're not even that. Like, you're just a big, tough bit of meat that the dragon's going to slap around for a few rounds.
Yeah, I think that is definitely one of the coolest ways to kind of deal with the, like, reduction to 0 hit points means death, because you are playing a game with your friends. As long as your friend isn't super, like, pissed off that you've just killed their character and they understand that they're kind of playing a game, you might even be able to let them control their character,
their shadow. That could even be fun to give them something, like, rather than just having to sit out the game then. I mean, it's handy to have someone make the tea, but like, yeah, of course. But yeah, I think that's true. I actually think that's a great idea, that you might actually give them the shadow character sheet and say, you get to play this for a while. You work for the dragon, but you can take your own turns, because I think it'll be more fun.
That might even be a very simple way to begin a player's introduction into being a DM, like giving them a stat block for a monster.
Actually a fair point, Tim. I hadn't even thought of that, but that's a really good way to look at it. Like, it's almost like, hey, now you're like my side DM, and then they get a kind of a feel for it. That's a really good point. Another thing you can do when someone dies is, like, you can this isn't related to dragons, so
when you die, you can go to heaven, or you could be reincarnated.
But like literally, this is actually something I was thinking about, is like, so like in 5th edition especially, it's very easy to come back from the dead, because even clerics with access to 3rd level magic, so like 5th level clerics, can revive people with Revivify, which has the 1 minute limit. And then obviously every reincarnation spell after that has a much longer limit. Reincarnate and Raise Dead and Resurrection and then True Resurrection all have longer time limits. And something I was thinking about, less so with Revivify in fairness, more so with the spells with the longer time limit, something that doesn't come up much is the idea that, like, if your character dies, they go probably, I mean, you'd hope, to paradise, right? To some kind of mythical afterlife. And it's just something that I don't think gets explored much, that, like, you get a choice. Like, if your friends try to bring you back from the dead, you get to choose whether you want to go back. And, like, how many of us, if you were in paradise, it would be like, do you want to come back to the place where you died so that you can die again? Like, even, like, honestly, like, it's like setting the stakes back. Like, if you went on holiday and you went for a hike and, like, fucking broke your leg and had to spend over the next week in the hotel room, and then as soon as you recovered, your friend's like, do you want to go back up that hill you broke your leg on? Like, you wouldn't be like, sure, look, I may as well, Do you
want to jump in that same lake where you hit your leg on that rock from the same spot?
Remember when that shark bit your leg off? We're going back to that beach again. We were wondering if you wanted to maybe, like, it's just, you know what I mean? Like, the kind of question of, like, would you actually come back from paradise? Is not something that I think gets explained much. I think it's a shame, because I actually think it's a really interesting thing, and I think it's actually really interesting as a character to get to make that decision. I think it should be part of like the process of coming back from the dead, that your DM, like, sets the stage and puts you in paradise and asks you if you want to go back to the material world and potentially suffer and struggle again. Like, is that actually what you want? Like, the people you are maybe fighting for are up here in paradise. You could just be with them. Are you sure you want to go back? And I think that would be kind of interesting. Obviously, it might mean more characters just don't come back. But maybe that's not so bad. Like,
death is just another path. So most of my work for this episode came in my thinking about Shadow. specifically.
Okay.
And so I kind of came up with two small lists. One is like scary shadow.
Oh no.
Like the thoughts of a shadow being frightening are obviously the like the darkness. Shadow is associated with evil, like the absence of light, and a place that is untouched by light that is all around it. Like if something is in a shadow, it is only in shadow because it's not in direct contact with the light. And that's all like classic stuff. But then I thought, like, so shadow is not frightening at all times. Like some people find shade and shadow like calm or comforting. Or in one of the symbols that I was looking at, it said that like the symbol of shadow can be used as like protection from damaging sunlight.
Oh, I see.
So in all of that, I had kind of considered that this doesn't give the shadow dragons a specific kind of character with regards like how they interact with the world. Like every other chromatic dragon and metallic dragon has a very specific character, but I think that the shadow dragon doesn't have as explicit a one. And so I kind of thought of a kind of a character that might be kind of interesting, where yes, they are from the Shadowfell and they are destructive and they want to spread this shadow, but I think that they will find they'll have a mercy for people who are already suffering from some great gloom, like some great sadness or like a depression or something. Like they'll find someone like that and they'll want to protect them, maybe. Like they're not just like these pure evil characters like potentially the chromatic dragons are, but they're also not like pure lovely men like the metallic dragons are.
Yeah.
So the shadow can be protection from the light, but it's also not total darkness. So I found that a kind of fun little idea to kind of work with regards its character.
I like that a lot. Yeah. I like the idea of like them having a unique role in the world. That's kind of cool. I like that. I'm not sure how I'd use that. I'm just kind of musing on that now.
Yeah, but then the more fun stuff with regards like creating something with this Shadowfell dragon in mind was the other planes influencing dragons. And one of my favorite ones that I came up with was the ethereal dragon, where a dragon has been influenced by the ethereal plane, or maybe it's a dragon who has died, where it's only visible if you can see the ethereal plane, and it is this great ghostly grey floating character, and is basically like an ethereal kind of grim reaper, where its character is kind of solemn and soft-spoken and relatively kind, and its breath weapon could be an absolution breath, or I had a couple different words for this one, where it was clement or release or absolution breath that helps spirits move on from this world as like an ethereal grim reaper, which I thought was super cool. I don't think it's going to be one that is necessarily like a danger to characters or player characters in the world, but maybe they can encounter it in like a graveyard if they are like, oh, I want to look into the ethereal plane and maybe ask a ghost or something, and then they look into the ethereal plane and this great looming grey dragon that's wings like blow in this ethereal breeze that move it about kind of thing. That was a very fun one.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Almost like, you could imagine them kind of hanging lazily like over a graveyard, or like even the scene of a great battle. Yeah.
And guiding people through, or just kind of like extinguishing the shadows and pushing them through the ethereal plane into paradise or wherever else their soul is going. Like they are just a shepherd to the dead, basically. I have 4 others if you want me to go into.
I do. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
Come on.
So
hit me up, bro.
The Feywild dragon that I kind of came up with was basically, I know that fairy dragons exist, which you mentioned earlier that we're not going to get to for a while, but I wanted to kind of touch on them because the fairy dragons, as they are in the monster manual, are a very low level, small, or actually tiny dragon. But I was thinking that if you wanted to size it up, basically, the fairy dragons in their small forms have specific colors, but they become the different colors as they grow to be up to 50 years or more. But I think that an ancient Feywild dragon could be this kind of iridescent rainbow-colored thing.
Oh, yeah,
with these beautiful butterfly wings that beat, and maybe those scales that are usually on a butterfly's wings can have some kind of influence, and that what did I have for them? That their character would be kind of chaotic and playful, but they'd also be like merciless. Like the fun that they can have with the player characters is the most interesting part, where they want to toy with this thing, and maybe a giant fairy dragon or an ancient fairy dragon has caused some dramatic change in the Feywild. If you wanted to have a campaign in the Feywild, this could be a prompt to cause that. And most of the material plane won't have any idea, but students or wizards or like the studious people within the material plane might get some clues to this, or people who move between the planes, like what are the weird planar Feywild elf guys called? No, they're not Ettins. I can't remember at all. Eladrin, I think.
Oh, yes.
Something like that. Anyway, but like maybe you'll learn about that, and that can be a prompt for you to do that for this giant fairy dragon who's causing some great chaos within the Feywild. Maybe it destroys an ancient Fey city or something, just for lulz.
What a horrible thing to do.
Yes. My next idea is for an astral dragon.
Okay.
Which I couldn't really come up with something huge, but I thought that it would be fun to like reflavor an astral dreadnought, basically, because the astral dreadnoughts are these ancient things that just float through the astral plane and then just devour everything. And the coolest idea I came up with for them was for an astral dragon, they have like a stellar breath, because they're among the stars, and it does psychic damage instead of any other.
Cool. Yeah, I like that.
I gave them all little words to describe their characters. So the astral dragon is unfeeling, destructive, and empty, because they're just these things just floating through the void that is the astral plane. Character. He's empty. There's nothing to him, but he's this great destructive force.
God, imagine Sean Connery being your DM.
Welcome to the Feywild, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll settle for you with the Sean Connery voice as my DM. Actually, that's fine. Fuck it.
Excellent.
I wouldn't have to teach them the rules.
I would forget I was playing and just listen to the voice the whole time.
Sorry, what do you want me to do?
Sorry, what? What's that all about?
Sorry, what? What's happening?
So in D&D, there's also a mirror dimension, or like a mirror plane. And so I thought a reflector dragon, who is like this pure mercurial skinned thing that is basically immortal, and that reflects all attacks and effects and damage done to it. But it's more of a guide through the mirror plane, because the mirror plane is like you move through a mirror and then you're in this like reflected version of reality.
Oh god.
But there is like an in-between space that is basically just a long corridor of mirrors.
Okay.
And so for this is more of a character than like a cool mechanical thing, but to have this mirror dragon be your guide might be a fun, interesting way to go about that.
Just to jump on that, there is actually, in the previous editions of the game, there is actually a Mercury dragon.
Oh yeah, we talked about that with the silver one, I think.
I think we mentioned it, yeah. But just, in terms of like that idea, there is a Mercury dragon, and their abilities are tied to the idea that they're kind of reflective and mirror-like.
Yeah, that could be fun. Or like mixing those two, because for me, I was thinking specifically like a reflector dragon that like if you attack it, the attack hits you. Like if you throw a fireball, it just bounces back and hits you, kind of thing. So you very quickly learn, I don't want to hit this thing.
I want to hit me? What?
What? Why would I want to No. And then my last one that I came up with was a temporal dragon. A dragon of the temporal plane. Which is when the time wizard successfully causes the baby dragon to turn into an ancient dragon. That's it. That was a joke. I couldn't think of anything cool.
And then it has 2,400 attack points, and it's still fucking worse than Dark Magician. Why did I summon this monster?
Why? Polymerization.
In third edition and in Pathfinder, there is a temporal dragon.
Oh, cool.
And the one ability they have that I care about, they're fine, like they're cool and stuff like that. But the one ability they have that I like the most is it has an ability where 3 times in its entire life, it can just send itself and any number of nearby, like I think like up to like 8 other nearby creatures to any point in time.
Cool.
And I just think that's so cool. Like I absolutely adore that ability.
Like the fact that it's limited as well is even like...
Yeah, I know, exactly. Like that actually makes it more interesting because it's like the dragon knows that it can only do this a few times. So like I've always really like thought that the idea that like the players like meet this temporal dragon and use its powers or come to rely on them to achieve something would be such a cool interaction.
Yeah.
It would be a great setup actually for like any, campaign that effectively has gone wrong where the bad guys have somehow won.
Yeah,
the idea that the players seek out like, time travel as a way to solve this problem.
Yeah, like in my campaign.
Exactly.
Except it's the gods that do it to you, and they don't explain anything.
And they don't explain anything, which is bloody rude, but I mean, typical for gods anyway.
Yeah, that's what I was going for.
It was great. It was very like, it was very like, what's happening? Like,
what are we doing in this tower?
What are we doing? Which was great. But yeah, like the idea of like the temporal dragon, it's just like very, very cool. So that's my input there.
So yeah, the kind of idea of planar dragons, I think kind of excited me quite a bit to like consider the various different iterations of dragon that you could have for whatever planes. There were the kind of chaos planes, which are like Abyss and like the 9 Hells, and there's fucking like 15 of them or something, and I was like, fuck that, I'm just gonna pick and choose my favorites.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
Yeah. And so by all means use whatever you like, and like if you come up with something, I'd love to hear any kind of idea about like an abyssal dragon that is distinct from a shadow dragon, or like a hell dragon that is distinct from like a fire dragon.
A heck dragon.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry. Yeah, a heck dragon.
Excuse me. I actually, just on that subject, as we described before the mics turned on, we talked about kind of planar dragons in the context of 4th edition.
Yes.
4th edition has the Shadow Dragon, but it puts the Shadow Dragon under the category of Shadowfell dragons.
Yes.
And it actually had another dragon here, which was the Blight Dragon.
Yeah. Which
has really cool art that we discussed briefly.
Yeah, we had fun with that.
It's a really interesting idea. It's basically just a dragon that's sort of represents the ruin of the Shadowfell, and everything around it falls to dust and is destroyed, and it grinds away its opponents with like dust storms and things like that.
Yeah, so fucking cool.
It's very cool. And the Feywild actually has a larger fairy dragon called the Mirage Dragon, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's all about sort of basically like sort of the illusory trickery that's typical of Fey creatures.
Right.
It uses that, but it's also a big dragon. So that's sort of a bad time twice.
Double bad.
Oh no.
Any final thoughts with regards specifically the Shadow Dragon, or any of the others that we kind of mess around with?
Just to return to it, the idea that you mentioned briefly, that you could kind of have a quest about restoring a Shadow Dragon to its previous form. I think that's a really interesting idea. I mean, there's obviously the fact that you can use the wish spell to just do whatever you like.
Yeah.
But like, without that in mind, I think the idea that you have to expose the dragon to something to like free it, and I think you could have that be another dragon, perhaps like a light dragon or something. But I just like the idea of like maybe you have to retrieve like something of pure light, so like a piece of the sun, or some stolen part of the like God's power from, you have to like basically like heist heaven to get some sunlight or whatever.
That's awesome.
That could be kind of cool. I think that would be a lot of fun, and like I think you could do it as a really cool like high level campaign where like the players get the implicit backing of a group of dragons who want like their kin back.
Yeah.
And so you basically have access to like all these creatures' hordes, and you can use all their resources. So you get a bunch of cool toys.
Yeah.
So you could kind of have a really fun, like very high level campaign where like you are literally entering into this world, like unlike the material plane that you'd normally adventure on.
Yeah.
You're kind of engaging in this like, planar adventure, but there's also kind of a deeply personal element to it that makes it kind of easier to understand and relate to, rather than it being like, we have to save all of the universes ever. It's like, we have to save exactly one creature, and it's just about doing that however we can.
Yeah. I think a cool way to plant the seeds for a late game campaign would be to say that there is a council of the metallic dragons, but maybe the bronze dragon hasn't shown up for the last like 4 or 5 meetings, which happen every season or something, and they're kind of wondering where he is, but he's a little bit flighty as it is anyway, so they're not terribly worried about it. And so maybe the missing dragon would be it like bronze or copper, or even like a gold dragon, because the gold dragons in 5th edition are kind of weird and dreamy as it is, and then have them show up as a shadow dragon, and so they will cause some great rampage of destruction, and the rest of the council has kind of decided that they don't want to kill this ancient friend of theirs, but they need to find some way to work about it. And so at that point, when you're at that high a level, you're working with like worldly issues and stuff, so you can go to, I don't know, heaven itself, and then ask like like whoever's there if you can borrow like a something, like maybe a wish,
a cup of tea,
a cup on tea. He just needs to sit down.
A cup of sugar.
A bowl of sugar.
So yeah, like, and I think, you could even add different factions. Like, you could have this sort of, council of elder worms that are trying to deal with this problem, but because they don't want to kill their friend, they have to like imprison them. So they have to like commit resources to doing that. And then they have the problem of like the chromatic dragons are trying to take advantage of this discontent and weakness. And they're moving in certain ways as well. And so like you've got this very natural enemy where like not only are you coming into conflict with, I don't know, heaven and earth or whatever to get this thing to save this one creature, but also like other entities are invested in the continuing problem and descent and the conflict. And maybe even, wait a minute, the bronze dragon was gone and came back, which means there's a portal to the Shadowfell. Did we do something about that? Oh no. Did we assign someone to look after the Shadowfell portal? Like, so that immediately, like, then it's like, you can have this great, like, climax where this huge force bursts from the portal, right, as you're trying to save this dragon. And like, you've got to deal with all these different problems at once.
Gosh, that would be so cool. You can give them the choice to either deal with this great new portal to the Shadowfell, or search for the heart of this dragon, or some way to heal this dragon, and whichever one they don't choose is the one that goes catastrophically wrong whenever they've solved the other.
And even like, I mean, geez, like even make it more straightforward. Like, hey, we know what's going to cure this dragon. It's a piece of the sun. We need to steal a piece of the sun from heaven. And then they do that. And then you go, by the way, that piece of the sun would also close that portal. Just saying, like, no, just put, I don't care what you do. I'm just the DM. But hey, by the way, that other problem you have to deal with, the one thing you have can deal with 2 problems.
Yeah.
Just so that you know. And then just make that a problem for the party to deal with, which is just what being a DM is, basically.
Yeah, basically, just make your players hate you and do your best to kill them. When they're at a high level, you really have to try hard. Like, you haven't been doing your job if your players get to a high level.
Frankly, if your players are at a high level, you failed as a DM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a great episode.
It was a great time.
Wait, it's not over yet. We haven't ended.
Oh, piss. I don't know what else to say about me
neither.
The Shadow Dragons.
So there you go. Thank you, everybody, for listening again. We appreciate you getting this far through the dragons with us. We will be moving on to our big wrap-up Dragons episode.
Oh, God.
In the next one, if we get to it ever. There may be some interstitial podcasts in the meantime.
Yeah.
But we will get to that, and we'll do a big wrap-up, and we'll share some of the ideas that we've been having maybe even like share some of the specific ideas that we thought were particularly cool from the rest of the episodes that we've done.
Yes.
But that is the plan for our next Creature Club episode.
Yeah.
So you can send us your ideas that you have about dragons, either the ones of the specific planes, which I kind of called for, via Twitter. You can tweet at us at Creature Club Pod, or just search Creature Club Podcast in the search bar. Send us like short little ideas. Like my notes for my other planar dragons were like 4 lines long with just like a name, a cool breath, some description. Like,
I really liked that, actually. That was such a cool, like, evocative, simple idea.
Yeah.
But like you could really easily take and expand on. I thought it was really cool as like an idea of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like keywords, but like almost like tone words, I guess would almost be how I describe them. Like that's what they felt like. I thought that was really cool, especially like the Astral Dragon just being like empty. I think that's like such a great idea of like, you know, and like obviously then the cool thing is like you take a word like that and you're like, I'm going to make a dungeon based on that, and then you can use that as like one of the themes you want to work on in your dungeon and everything.
The dungeon is empty.
There is fucking no treasure. You guys are idiots for coming here.
Yeah. Guys have been working so hard in this
dungeon.
dungeon.
They go to every room in the dungeon, and it's so big. Like, it obviously took you so long to build, but there's literally nothing in it except for a dragon in the last room, and that's it.
Oh god, that's such a troll move.
Oh god.
Okay, so you can also send longer form ideas to us at our email address, creatureclubpodcast@gmail.com. You can also leave us a review on Stitcher. I believe you can leave a review, and also iTunes you can leave a review. I don't think any of the others really have.
Maybe. I don't know if they can do reviews there, but
not yet. I think they're thinking of implementing it over the course of the next X amount of years, somewhere between now and the end of time. Basically, it'll get done.
Oh, cool. I hope I'll still be alive.
Who knows?
Who knows? Who can say?
And that's kind of it, I think. Did I miss anything? I feel like I missed something.
You said the website. You said Did you say the website?
I didn't say the website.
Oh, okay.
Go to the website, creatureclubpodcast.com. We have a contact us form that you can send us stuff there as well. There you go. And there's even a nice little picture of us that's been up there since the beginning that I'm a very big fan of. Anytime I go to that website, I just pop by that page and like, good times.
It's a great picture. I really like that picture.
Excellent.
I'm so happy with it.
And I think that's it.
All right. I think you're right.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. So if you could all hop in the fridge and just hang around there for a bit. Don't do that. That's a very bad idea. It's very dangerous. Oh my
God, that's the butter. Like, don't. I'm gonna have to buy new butter now. You know that?
Yeah, that's true. That's the real bad thing that happens when you hop in a fridge. You melt the butter.
All right, that shelf, that's for you.
Yeah, okay. we have a separate shelf just for you.
Yeah, obviously. No, don't stop touching my beers. Those aren't for you.
You're gonna warm my beers as well. Oh my god, you are the worst. Get out of the fridge.
He's sleeping on my beers. He's gonna make them warm. I don't understand.
Get out of the kiln. That's it. 2 Auntie Donna references for our listener who pointed out the one in the last episode.
That's your fill. That's all we get. Any more and we get arrested.
So how do we end? How do we usually end them? I can't even remember that.
We're not allowed to use Mikey's catchphrase.
No.
Because of the law. He will arrest us.
He will. We'll be under arrest.
Yeah. He said, well, last time I did it as a joke and he just sent me a picture.
We had to delete it and re-upload it without it. It was dark times. That bit's just trail off. Just like have us gradually fade out. The Shadowfell also has a dispiriting effect on its denizens, such that such that the creature...
This sentence is a nightmare, man. Sorry.
Okay. Shadowfell also has a dispiriting effect on its denizens. I'm going to take that again. Shadowfell has a dispiriting effect on its denizens.